Hello, welcome back to the Danny Talks About Movies for Too Long show. Um, it's been a while since I've done just a normal me talking to the camera about movies that I like or don't video, and I wanted to do one of those. This I've had a bunch of stuff on the go during this pandemic. Um, this is a list of projects that I've started, and this is the list of projects that I finished. Oh, that was so bad. So I've been making a lot of great progress on stuff. Um, and yes, and yet I am starting a whole new video instead of finishing any of those other things that I've started, because sometimes you just gotta do one thing all the way through till completion before you can move on and and get back in the groove. I guess that's my goal, at least with this video. Also, I wanted to talk about a bunch of stuff, um, none of which I have enough to say to warrant really its own video. So instead, we're going to do one long video that covers a bunch of topics. And most of these topics are things that I did during the pandemic, basically. Mostly I just watched movies and played some video games, and that's basically it. That's the short version. But basically, I realized that instead of watching new things or things that I've never seen before, like I have this whole one second. I have this whole list of 100 movies you should see before you die or whatever. And during the pandemic, you'd think this would be a perfect time to watch all these movies that I've never seen before. But I watched maybe two on this list. And then the rest of the time, I just spent rewatching stuff that I already have seen, and mostly stuff that I know I already like. Um, and I think the lesson in that was these are these are these are these are unusual times. The lesson, I think, is that sometimes life is shitty, and you don't want to be challenged or think too hard. And sometimes it's nice to just watch something you already enjoy, um, and because it's comforting, it's familiar, and so that's what I did. I spent the pandemic just kind of rewatching every major franchise that I like. So here is the complete history of stuff that I've seen before. And go. But before we do that, I want to talk about the new Zelda game that just got announced today, because I'm really excited about it and I have no one to talk to. So I'm just going to throw that in this video, even though it's even though it's somewhat unrelated to everything else. So Nintendo just announced a new Hyrule Warriors game, which is a Zelda spin-off series. I guess it's a series now. That's like a crossover between the Zelda and Dynasty Warrior series. But this new one, it's called Age of Calamity or something. It's a prequel to Breath of the Wild. So it's a new entry in a Zelda spin-off series that's a crossover with another completely unrelated series that's a prequel to Breath of the Wild, which is also getting a sequel at some point. The gist of all that is that I'm very excited about this because it looks really cool. That was one of my only gripes about Breath of the Wild, which is a phenomenal game. Is that the trailers made me think that there was going to be actually a lot of story involved in the main campaign, but there kind of isn't. We get little flashbacks here and there, But we don't really get, but it's not really about the story of Breath of the Wild. It's more about the like sense of exploration and discovery. Um, so the game ended up being great on its own, even though it was slightly different from what I was expecting. Oh boy, I have not talked for this long in a while, so I'm gonna either lose my voice or just become sick and die. So that's fun. But anyways, this game takes place 100 years before the main events of Breath of the Wild, which we get a little bit of in certain flashbacks during the game, but we don't really get like a lot of what happened during that time. So this is really exciting because we're gonna actually like get to see that whole part of the story fleshed out and expanded upon. It's something we normally really don't get in Zelda games at all. Is like you always hear about like certain elements of the history and stuff, but you don't really like they don't really flesh them out too much, especially not like between games and stuff like that. This is still like kind of within Breath of the Wild, but it's like really focused on like one particular area, which we don't really know too much about. I think the Hyrule Warriors gameplay will work perfectly for this chapter because there's supposed to be like this big war that happens. So and yeah, switching between like Link and the different champions sounds like really like that could be really fun. Yeah, I'm just kind of like stoked to get a new Zelda game this year because I didn't know we would get one, and now I'm gonna have to make some more money so I can buy it. So thanks, Nintendo. Yeah, like just everything they've showed off so far looks really really cool. Um, the Hyrule Warriors team is working directly with the Zelda team to get like the aesthetic and the graphics and the style down and make it fit perfectly within that world. So that makes me really excited because it's this like kind of spin-off title, but it's also like part of the main story of Breath of the Wild, which makes me really excited, and yeah, it looks cool. That's it. All right, I guess we'll go on to like the main stuff that I wanted to talk about this video, and in no particular order. I just have a list of topics and we're just going to start going through them. And hopefully I don't lose my voice in the process. Let's talk about Pirates of the Caribbean. This is one of the first series we ended up watching during the pandemic, I think. And it was just completely on a whim. We were like, hey, you want to watch Pirates of the Caribbean? Sure. And so then we ended up watching the whole trilogy, and I'm not going to talk about 4 and 5 because I don't care about them. But that first Pirates of the Caribbean is kind of the perfect blockbuster. It is excellent. It's a gosh dang classic, and it came out not that long ago. I think the only other blockbusters that can maybe compete with the pure like iconography of that first movie is maybe the Avengers, the Dark Knight, and Inception. And other than those three, maybe Mad Max Fury Road, a very small handful of movies have been as iconic as the first Pirates. I would put it right up there with like Jaws, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, like in terms of like classic blockbuster movies. It's that fucking good. It's a perfect storm of different elements that shouldn't necessarily work together, but they somehow do. Everything just was done so excellently that it worked out perfectly. It's based off of a Disney ride. Why would that make a good movie? Johnny Depp came on scene and was like, I'm gonna do a Keith Richards thing because pirates were the rock stars of the fucking pirate times, and like that is a terrible idea, but it works in this. And I think part of it is because they didn't know if it was gonna work, and so they had like a little bit of restraint on some of these crazier ideas, unlike the sequels, which we'll get to in a second. But one of the main things that works about this movie is it's just got a great fucking story. It's essentially just Star Wars, but Will Turner is Luke, and Jack Sparrow functions as both Han Solo and Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is a brilliant idea. Jack Sparrow is like one of the most iconic fucking movie characters of all time, and it's his introduction scene alone, easily, easily the top three in the top three best character introductions ever, along with like probably Darth Vader and Frayne Kranz's character in Cabin in the Woods.
People in this town drive in a very counterintuitive manner. That's what I have to say.
Everything about this movie works. The set pieces, the special effects, like the CGI still holds up really well today, and I think it's mostly because they hide it in nighttime scenes. This score is fucking iconic as hell. Take a drink every time I say this movie is iconic. Everyone gives credit to Hans Zimmer for this score, but that's not entirely true. This score is actually created by Klaus Badelt, but it does sound a lot like a Hans Zimmer score, and the reason is because it used the score from Gladiator as a temp track. I'm pretty sure, or Klaus Badelt was just very lazy, because it's almost identical to the Gladiator score, which was done by Hans Zimmer. The other guy, Klaus Badelt, who did, and I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, who did the Pirates score and almost nothing else, worked on Gladiator with Hans Zimmer. So that I think is why it sounds very much like a Hans Zimmer score, because it literally sounds like a Hans Zimmer score. Hans Zimmer did the sequels, which honestly are less good in terms of score. The second one just kind of recycles the score from the first one, which is fine, but it doesn't really have that much of its own flavor, apart from the Davy Jones theme, which is pretty great. The third one goes off in like its own direction and is like, it's the third movie, so it has to be like big and epic and grand and stuff, and it's like fine. The main like dark pirate song that they sing at the beginning where the kid gets hanged is like chilling and works for what they're going for, but like that score kind of just becomes the main theme of the movie, and it's like, where's the pirates theme? I want to hear the pirate theme, and you don't really get it until like the very end. Back to the first movie. Again, what works so great about this score is how it is timed perfectly with all of the action in the movie. We don't really see this kind of score that much anymore, as movie scores are more Hans Zimmer-y and atmospheric nowadays. We don't really see that kind of style anymore of things like timing the music perfectly to the beats of the action. Like, for example, the sword fight between Will and Jack Sparrow, which again, what a fucking great scene. It perfectly sets up all the relationship between Jack and Will, as well as, really sets up Will as a character, and just like it's right up there with the Inigo Wesley fight in Princess Bride. It's like, it's really great. They use the environment to their advantage in different elements of the sword fight. It's the perfect match of character interaction with like dialogue and stuff, as well as like physical cool fighting. It's just great. I don't know what else to say about it. Barbossa fucking kicks ass in this movie. Jeffrey Rush is excellent, and this movie has one of my favorite endings of all times, where they complete the arcs of all three of their main characters in the same moment, when during the fight between Will, Jack, and Barbossa at the end, Jack shoots Barbossa. Barbossa's like, "You wasted your shot." Will's like, "No, he didn't," and he drops the bloody coins into the thing, relieving the curse. Barbossa fucking dies, and he says, "I feel gold." So fucking good. Will accepts his destiny as both a pirate and a good man, the son of his father. Jack gets his revenge, and Barbossa gets to feel mortal again as he dies. Fucking excellent stuff. He drops the apple, even though he wasn't holding it in the last shot, but it still looks cool. It's great. 2 and 3, less good. Don't get me wrong, there's still elements that I really like about these movies. I do kind of enjoy how fucking weird they get, where especially since they let the director, who I'm gonna pronounce his name wrong, so I'm just gonna put it here. They just let him kind of do whatever the fuck he wanted, which meant that they just got weirder and until insanity by the third one. Davy Jones is somehow almost just as iconic as Barbossa in terms of villains. Um, Excellent performance by Bill Nighy. Special effects still hold up for the most part, except for some of the daytime scenes where the CG doesn't look quite as good. But I think the second Pirates marks an important transition for not just Disney as a filmmaking company, but for blockbuster cinema as a whole. First movie, really great filmmaking, all like barely like huge set pieces, all real ships on real waters, real locations, shot on film. Like it's like it has that like classic blockbuster feel. Obviously, there's CG used heavily in certain sequences, but it's all like for the greater purpose of telling this specific story, as well as they actually like kind of hold back and restrain for the most part, and we only really see the stuff at night, which just kind of adds to the atmosphere and everything that they're doing with the story. The second Pirates, shot digitally, heavy use of green screen and even more CG. Hardly ever on the real ocean. The movie even opens with like the bigger, more cinematic Disney logo, which was the first time they ever used that. And I think this movie, Pirates 2, Dead Man's Chest, marks the like shifting point of how they make big budget studio blockbusters. We see this trend in other series as well. The Marvel movies, first Iron Man's shot on, first two Iron Mans I think shot on film. Even Avengers I think was still shot on film. Heavy use of practical effects, real sets, real locations as often as possible. When there is CG, there's always a real element as well. Even Avengers still used a lot of real effects and elements, and then enhanced them with like CGI stuff later on. But you know, nowadays, entire thing shot on a green screen pretty much. Huge amounts of it are changed in CG. Even like crazy things like, oh, we want to slightly modify Black Panther's design, so we're gonna CG his entire costume for the entire movie. And it's like, is that worth it? What's weird to me is like both ways of shooting are super expensive, and it's like if you're gonna spend that much anyways, you might as well shoot practically. The point of this is that I think Pirates 2 got overzealous and over like, oh, we got to make it big and epic. So so there's an over reliance on CG, and it just doesn't have the same like filmmaking charm of the first one. That paired with a less good story, they spend like 45 minutes on that jungle island that has nothing to do with the main plot of the movie. They bring Barbossa back at the very end, which is a fucking great moment. Great like end credits cliffhanger moment. But then in the third one, they don't really justify him being there so much. And I think it comes down to like we don't really get a good explanation of like how he came back. He just is back, and it's like, okay, well, if you could just bring back anyone who's died, are there really stakes anymore? And that one also goes like off the deep end wackiness. There's a lady who turns giant and then turns into a bunch of crabs. Yeah, Jack's gone from like quirky to insane. There's a pirate council with a bunch of different racial stereotypes. It's it's bonkers. Yeah, and I think those last two movies kind of set Disney on the path of where they are now, a mega conglomerate that makes blockbuster movies that all kind of feel the same, even when they're from different franchises. I could probably make a video about how Captain Marvel, Mulan, and Frozen 2 are all the same movie. And I don't even think I would have to try that hard. And, yeah, I don't know what the point of that was. I guess it was just a bunch of stuff that I wanted to say about Pirates of the Caribbean. Next topic. Star Wars. The Star Wars keeps going forever. So Star Wars is a thing that I like sometimes. Most of the time, it makes me sad. We got a little bit of more Star Wars stuff this year, which is sort of interesting, but also not. Um, because they can't just stop. They can't just like, okay, we made 3 movies that all made $1 billion. Let's take a break. They have to keep releasing more Star Wars stuff. So there's a whole other season of the Clone Wars, the show that Disney canceled. They brought it back for reasons, which was already like a bad sign because they actually managed to wrap up pretty much everything from the Clone Wars in the follow-up show Rebels. We found out what happened to Ahsoka, Rex, and Darth Maul, which is like I guess the main 3 biggest characters that came out of Clone Wars. But then they're like, yeah, let's do another season. So here's the thing. The latest season ruined the show for me entirely. At first when it was coming out week to week, we got this like kind of fun like arc with Rex and stuff like that, and although it wasn't like the best thing ever, it was some of the best animation the show had ever done, and there's some cool action and stuff like that, and overall I was still enjoying it. Because it was coming out week to week and I hadn't seen it all as a whole yet, it still kind of gave me something to look forward to, especially during the pandemic when nothing's happening and everything is terrible. It was kind of nice to be like, oh, every week I know that there's a new Star Wars coming out, and I can at least, like, even if it's not the best, it's still got lightsabers and lasers in it, and I like Star Wars, so I like those things. That was another project that I had started during the pandemic, is I have this Rex, I guess it's a Rex helmet, that I was gonna make into like a gold thing, and then do some kind of skit or short with it. But this is how far I got. So, as you can see, that didn't end up happening. This last season of the Clone Wars kind of went from meh to bad to oh no, because at first it was like kind of enjoyable, and then like they spent a lot of time on this terrible arc with Ahsoka, which was bad and didn't really go anywhere. But then eventually we got to the stuff with Darth Maul, and that stuff was kind of fun. First I was kind of like, oh, he's just back. He's just back. We don't really get a follow up to like the last time we saw him in the show, which is where he had this big fight with Palpatine, and then Palpatine like electrocuted him. It was like, I've got plans for you, don't worry. And then like we just never saw him again, and we're not gonna see what happened to him after that. He's just back. He's just doing his thing like he was before that happened. Oh, well, if you read the such and such a comic book that explains the backstory of Darth Maul between the last time we saw him in the Clone Wars and then the next time we see him in whatever. I don't care. I don't care about the whatever comics that explain the in-between shit. You got another season of the show to wrap it up, and you're not going to spend any of the 12 episodes you have explaining what happened to Darth Maul after that, like, cliffhanger? What? Why not? That's stupid. I don't care if it's already in the comic. Just show that. Just do that. Oh, it's like what? Why are you wasting all these episodes not just doing that? Anyways, we get the episodes where Ahsoka's fighting Darth Maul, and they got Ray Park to do the motion capture, and it's fun and cool looking, and all of that stuff. But then they like try to tie it into episode 3, and here's where I started to turn on the show for real, because I also like rewatched all the Star Wars movies 1 to 6. I don't give a fuck about the Disney ones. And when we got to episode 3, it was like, so Ahsoka is fighting Darth Maul right now during this movie? That's going on right now. During this movie where Anakin spends the majority of the runtime just kind of walking around Coruscant, talking to his wife, going to the opera, and at no point he tries to like call Ahsoka and like see how it's going. No, I don't buy that. They kind of also imply that episode 3 takes place over like months, because like Padme's not really showing when we first see her at the beginning of the movie, and then she like gives birth to 2 kids at the end. So like they kind of imply that there's some time passed, unless it's been like a week and she just showed from nothing to all the way in a week. What? While Darth Maul is doing his thing? What? The problem with the season of the Clone Wars is they tried to tie it into the movies. Something the Clone Wars has never cared about. Um, the Clone Wars was at its best when it was like, you know what? We don't care about the continuity of the series or the prequels really at all. So we're just going to do our own thing. Anakin has an apprentice, even though he's not even a master yet. He's just going to have an apprentice. Darth Maul is back. Because that'd be fun. What if Darth Maul was back? That'd be kind of cool. Doesn't make any fucking sense, no. But it's kind of cool. He's got robot legs. And then they're like, this ties into episode 3. It's all part of the same series. And you're like, what? What the fuck are you... What? What? It doesn't make any sense. And then also, they recently announced the new show, Star Wars, whatever, the Rogue Squadron, the Bad Batch, that's what it's called. Which means that arc with fucking Rex that I was like fine is now also terrible, because it was just a backdoor pilot to set up some new characters to go off and do their own show. God, can't we just end things? Why does everything have to set up another thing? Ugh. Anyways, I hate Star Wars again, so that's fun. Let's move on.
I've never been carbon frozen before, General. I don't want to end up a wall decoration.
Let's talk about another trilogy that's a good trilogy. The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is the best trilogy, probably ever. What a fucking masterpiece that series is. 3 movies, all shot at once. They spent like a lot of years shooting all the movies at once, working really hard on that script until it was great, until everything worked, casting it perfectly. Like all of these different elements just work. The score from Howard Shore is excellent. The costumes, the practical effects, the set design is insane. Like, so much work went into this series, and it completely paid off. They've never done something like that before, or really since. Sure, they've shot movies back to back before, the Hobbit movies was a similar situation, except the schedule was way more rushed, which is probably why those movies didn't really turn out very well. James Cameron James Cameron is getting unlimited money and time to make his 17 Avatar sequels, but like we'll see how those turn out. I doubt they'll be as impressive or hold up as well as those Lord of the Rings movies do. What a fucking great trilogy. That's really all I have to say about that series. Is it's just it's so good. That's about all I gotta say. And I wish they made more movies that were that good and that they spent that much time, like, getting everything perfect. During our pandemic quarantine, we searched for many different types of movies to watch that most of which we've already seen before. And we noticed that it was kind of fun to watch some movies that weren't very good some of the time. And so one of the series that we stumbled upon is what I like to call the Not Indiana Jones collection. A bunch of different series that are clearly influenced from Indiana Jones and try to capture a similar feel, but none of which succeeded quite as well as Indy did, except for maybe Uncharted, which we'll get to in a sec. I think this first came from we decided to watch the Temple of Doom and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which are the two worst Indiana Jones movies. Some people like Temple of Doom. I don't think it's very good. And I think it comes mostly from the structure is very weird. They just kind of throw you into an adventure without like really setting up any clear like character motivation or like some kind of relationship that like unfolds throughout the movie. It's just kind of like he's on an adventure and whatever happens. It's also like technically set before Raiders, which doesn't really make any sense because he encounters a bunch of magic and like crazy shit in Temple, but then by Raiders he's like, that's just a bunch of hocus pocus. I don't believe in anything supernatural. And Crystal Skull is a weird mess. But listen up. If you take the second half of Temple of Doom and combine it with the first half of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, together you get one good Indiana Jones movie. The second half of Temple of Doom is when they finally when they finally get to the titular Temple of Doom and we see that great scene where the big like Caliban scene where they rip the guy's heart out and he fucking goes down to hell, and like it's just like great set piece after set piece from that point on. There's the fucking minecart chase, which is great. The thing with the bridge and the alligators, all that stuff, excellent. First half, kind of weird. You got some annoying characters. It's unclear what is the goal of anything that's happening. They spend a lot of time on this relationship that you don't really care about, and the only thing that really redeems that stuff is just like the use of like cool practical effects and like real animals and stuff like that. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is a big fucking mess, and everyone knows it's not great. But the first half is not that bad. If you don't really care too much about the nuke in the fridge thing, which I really don't, a lot of people are like, that's it, that's the moment that ruined movies, and it's like, it's whatever, it's a whatever scene. It's like a who cares moment, and obviously, no one would survive that. Yes, you're right. I don't care. There's so many moments in every movie where you have to suspend your disbelief. This is just one more. I don't care. I don't care about that. I'm talking about the main like story of the movie where it's just like Indy looking for clues. He's got this weird Shia LaBeouf sidekick, but there's still like some cool practical car chases. Harrison Ford even does some of his own stunts, and like the guy's pretty spry for this one at this point. It's before his many plane accidents where he's permanently injured his leg. So he can still like run around and like do stuff. That motorcycle chase, fucking excellent. It's more in the second half when we start to get, basically when we get to that chase with the monkeys and the ants and like everything is a green screen and CG, that the movie really starts to go downhill. And then they literally go downhill over the Niagara Falls. It's also Niagara Falls for some reason, even though they're in like Peru or something. It's very weird and very bad. And then like the rest of the thing is just nonsense with aliens. But the like first half is like kind of a fun adventure, and I think even the stuff with like when Marion comes back and like you gotta grab the snake to pull him out of the thing. I think even some of that stuff is pretty fun. It's just literally like once they get to that car chase where everything is green screen and terrible looking, and he's swinging on the vines like that's awful. It's fucking awful from there on. But you put those two halves together, it's like not bad overall. I've talked for way too long about indie, and I have like 7 more movies I wanted to talk about in this one section. So the Not Indiana Jones collection. We're talking The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. We're talking the Angelina Jolie, Lara Croft Tomb Raider series. We're talking Nick Cage, National Treasure. These types of movies where it's like, it's got some Indiana Jones flair to it, but it's like not as good. Let's start off with The Mummy, the most like obvious one. The first movie, with Brendan Fraser, most obviously kind of doing an Indiana Jones type thing. It's set in around the same time period. It's got like an action movie treasure hunt vibe to it. It's pretty fun. It's got a lot of like fun, quirky characters. All of the like, there's like 2 groups of people searching for the tablet of Akhman Ra or whatever it is in this movie, the Book of the Dead, and like there's all these like American guys that are one group, and then it's like Brendan Fraser and his group of supporting cast, and they're all fun and get like time to be developed and stuff like that. But even like all the like extra American guys that are just kind of also there, like get like little fun personality traits as well. There's this great character Benny who's just like the biggest scumbag of all time. He has this great moment where he gets approached by the mummy and he just kind of like pulls out different like religious necklaces until he like finds one that works. It's really fun. And Brendan Fraser brings like a fun charisma that makes this movie entertaining to watch. I think it slows down a little bit in the first half of the second half of the movie, partway through the second act, and I think what they should have done instead of like have these big actions, these big set pieces in like whatever nearby city they're in, is the first half is like an Indiana Jones movie, and then the second half is closer to like a traditional monster movie. What I think is they should have stuck with that formula, and like once the mummy gets unleashed, like somewhere close to the midpoint, second half of the movie, it's a horror movie, and it's all in the tomb, in the mummy lair, and it's just them trying to survive and stop the curse or whatever. That's what the movie should have been, I think, and then it would have been fucking excellent. Obviously some of the CG doesn't hold up. Some of it's not terrible. Some of it's a bit of a mixed bag. But it's a pretty fun and entertaining movie overall, even though it is kind of stupid at certain points. The second Mummy, The Mummy Returns. It's the same thing again. Also, The Rock plays a giant scorpion at the very end. I don't have much to say about this one. They kind of just... It's the Mummy again. It's got the very big case of sequelitis. There's some big crazy action sequences, but they don't really do much to like flesh out or develop the characters in any way, so you kind of care less about what's happening. Mummy 3, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. What a fucking weird series. This one is also bad, but in a different way. I think structurally it's actually a better movie, because it's a little bit easier to follow sort of what's happening. Just because there's just like one mummy guy they have to stop, and it's sort of a story. They kind of tried to, I don't know, they kind of tried to make it more of a story on like the second one. Just like, it's again, the mummy's back, they're doing a thing, there's a kid this time, whatever. But the second one, or the third one, the Jet Li one, they at least try to like give it like a sense of story happening where it's kind of about Brendan Fraser and his son, who have now been estranged for a few years, like reconnecting. They even have like a really cheesy, over the top symbolism moment where they have to join this sacred dagger to kill the bad guy, and they like join it by like stabbing it together through him on both sides. So it's like them coming together to work together to destroy the bad guy. It's still kind of a bad movie, but at least but I argue they kind of felt like it kind of feels like they tried a little more to make it more of a story than the last one. But this one should be way better than it is, because it's also kind of dumb and bad. There's a lot of really dumb action and stuff, and some of it should be cool. They have Michelle Yeoh and Jet Li in this movie, and they have a fight scene, and it's just like okay, where it should be like excellent. Also, Yetis show up during this movie, just like randomly. It's very Uncharted 2, which we'll get to in a minute. But it's just like there's this thing, and like yeah, it's not really mummies this time. It's a different supernatural thing they're dealing with, sure, whatever. But it's like, okay, that's what we're doing. This movie is Dragon Emperor, magic, blah, 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 curse. We have to stop the curse, blah, blah, blah. Same kind of vibe, different continent. Got it. And then Yetis just show up and start, like, fighting the bad guys. And one of them kicks a field goal. It's insane. And then they're just like, yeah, we're like, in Tibet, which is sort of close to China. So Yetis are in the movie now, part of a completely different mythology, but whatever. And then they just kind of move on from that. They go to like Shangri-La or one of the lost cities of that part of Asia. And it's like the movie just becomes Uncharted 2 for like a hot minute, and then they're like, all right, back on to the main stuff, and it's very weird. And I think I like it more than the second one because it's so bonkers and weird, and they at least kind of try to make it a story. It is very weird though, because they're trying to still have some continuity with the series. So like, it has all the same characters as the last one, but like the kid is a different guy. He's way older and also American somehow, even though he was British in the second one. And then the wife, like the main girl of the movie, is just a different actress, and they're like, well, she's whatever, she's just a different actress this time. But like Brendan Fraser and the brother character are still the same, so it's just like weird. Yeah, that's those movies. Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the Angelina Jolie movies. These are kind of fun in like a really campy sort of way. I think the first one is a little bit better than the second one. It's about something, some kind of, I don't know, some kind of time thing that they're looking for. They're pretty self-aware in how cheesy they are. So these movies are definitely like a fun party, have some drinks and enjoy a dumb movie kind of vibe. First one's a little bit better because, again, they kind of at least attempted to tell a little bit of a story with her and her dad, played by Jon Voight, who is her real life dad,
but it's also interesting because John Voight also plays Nicolas Cage's dad in the National Treasure movies, which we'll get to in a second. So I guess they're related. Insert fan theory about how they're related. Movies are pretty fun. I wish that they had some more dinosaurs in them, because I know there's some dinosaurs in the games, some of the earlier games. I didn't see the new movie because it looked like it took itself seriously, which I think is the wrong direction to go with this series that's kind of a campy Indiana Jones ripoff, but with a girl. But like Angelina Jolie makes it work. She's hot. She does a lot of her own stunts, which sells the whole vibe. And they're kind of fun and campy and cool. So I don't know. I give it a pass. The first one is definitely a little bit better. Second one, something with Gerard Butler. There's some kind of tree monsters at the end, which is kind of whack. And she punches a shark at one point, which is probably the greatest thing of all time. But overall, less good of a movie because she doesn't have like a clear character motivation for what's happening, unlike the first one. Also, the first one has Daniel Craig playing an American, Daniel Craig, a British actor playing an American, Angelina Jolie, an American actress playing a British lady. So it's like kind of weird. Just make Daniel Craig British. Who cares? Why does he have to be American? That's stupid. He sounds weird. I don't like it.
So while editing this, I noticed that I completely forgot to talk about National Treasure, despite claiming that I would. So normally this wouldn't be an issue, but I feel like these three series kind of go well together. So here's really briefly my thoughts on the National Treasure franchise. Nick Cage is a really fun actor, and so these end up being kind of fun movies. Obviously they're pretty goofy and over the top and ridiculous. The first one I guess is technically better, although I think the second one is actually paced a lot better than the first one. The first one kind of blows its load early on when they steal the Declaration of Independence, which is the best sequence in the movie. And then it kind of never really reaches that height, the rest of it. Where the second one like builds from like sequence to sequence in like craziness and insanity until it's like a big elaborate them finding the city of gold, crazy like contraptions going off and stuff. Where the first one never really quite gets past the Declaration heist. The second one is also more dumber, which I think makes it more entertaining in some capacity. As the plot of the movie is, in order to redeem Nicolas Cage's great-grandfather's name, who was framed for killing Abraham Lincoln, they have to discover the lost city of gold by kidnapping the president. And I watched this movie recently, and I don't know how discovering the lost city of gold clears his great-grandfather's name. We watched this movie like, wait a minute, how does that work? Like, I remember that's part of the plot, but I don't remember how. And we like paid attention to like try to figure out how this is the case. And there is no answer. Also, Sean Bean is a better villain in the first one, so take your pick, I guess.
Next up on the Uncharted series. I've never played these before, and I got the opportunity to play through the first three, at least. We started the fourth one, I haven't finished it yet. But I liked what I played so far. First one, it's a little bit clunky, a little bit dated in certain parts, but it's still a fun time. We get to meet all the characters. And there's kind of zombies at the end, which is like weird and wacky. And I kind of dig it. But overall, I enjoyed it. The second one is definitely like improved overall for sure. Bigger, it's more cinematic. The combat and the environments are much more fleshed out. The graphics are a little bit better. But I kind of found myself a little more frustrated with this game than I did with the first one. The biggest thing that like kind of bothered me about the game is how like linear it was, and I get it. It's a linear story. They're trying to do a thing, but like something about like the way the environments seemed bigger and more exciting, but it was still you could only go in one linear path. Kind of like frustrated me and made me feel like I had less freedom in what was happening. Like, for example, there's this light puzzle in the second one. There's this like big sword thing you have to climb up and like reflect light with all these different mirrors. And I had like a really hard time figuring out this puzzle because like for me, my Zelda brain turned on and I'm like, okay, there's a light puzzle. I have to figure out where I'm supposed to direct this light to. So I started like trying to look around the room and like go back and forth between different areas to figure out which way I needed the light to point and stuff like that. But all that I had to do was climb up the thing, do a thing, and then climb up the thing again. And then the rest of the game like continued. And I couldn't figure out that that's all I had to do for some reason. And I think what was frustrating me was like they didn't really ask the player to like understand the puzzle as a whole, how it would work. They just like are like, figure out the direction you can go in and then the puzzle will solve itself. For example, I was trying to like figure out like, okay, there's this light that I have to reflect somewhere and I'm like trying to figure out where I'm supposed to reflect it, thinking that I'll have to go back and redirect it at some point. But then the game doesn't even let you go back to the previous thing because you've already done that part of the game and now you're moving on to the next part. But like I'm trying to figure out how it all works as like a whole puzzle, and the game's like, no, it's not about that. It's still the linear thing you were doing before. Just in the flavor text, it's a puzzle that you're solving. I don't know. Maybe it's my fault for using Zelda logic to try to solve an Uncharted puzzle, which is a different kind of thing. But I just found myself more frustrated more often in moments like this in the second game, and it just kind of made me feel like an idiot more often than in the first one when it was more linear. The third one, I don't know if it's just I kind of got used to the series by this point, or if they just kind of like polished up some of the gameplay by this point. But I felt like I enjoyed this one overall a lot more than I did with the second one. I didn't feel like an idiot as often. I think the combat gave you a lot more variety in the stuff you could do in the third game, which I really enjoyed because I felt like I got a lot of freedom in that section of the game, which was like some of my less favorite parts of the earlier game, of like the first game for example. So I think I overall enjoyed the gameplay more of the third one, but I also don't really remember as much about the story. The second one had this like really kind of fun arc with Nathan Drake and the girl Elena, and then the third one just kind of like retreads that same arc. They flesh out Sully a lot more in the third game, which is great. We get to see like how he and Nathan kind of met, which is really cool. I liked all that stuff a lot, but the stuff with like Elena is just like, all right, we've seen this before, and then the game ends again with you destroying another lost city, and it's like, all right, it's good, but it's not really doing anything new with the characters from the last game, except for some of the stuff with Sully, of course. The second one is also kind of nuts with like all the Yeti stuff that happens partway through. It's like very goofy and I enjoyed it a lot. Obviously there ends up being an explanation for it, but there is still a supernatural thing going on there, so that was really fun. The third game also had like the least memorable ending for me because the first two had like this like really hard, really annoying boss fights at the end, and the third one is just kind of like it's a quick time event and you beat the bad guy at the end, and then the lost city gets destroyed again, and you're like, all right. But the first two are much more memorable because they were more annoying. And I think they would try to avoid the annoyingness of that final boss fight in the third game, which I understand, but it made it less memorable of an experience overall. And I haven't really finished 4 yet, but so far I enjoy it. And that's all I could really say about that one. The Uncharted series definitely is the best attempt at recreating what worked about Indiana Jones. You have really fun, and it works because it's got really fun characters, engaging story, and really, really fun set pieces.
I guess now is as good a time as any to transition over to the Halo series. So let's do that. Halo is kind of like nerd Call of Duty. It's a big budget, like first-person shooter series, but it's also got all this like really nerdy lore about the world and all these different alien races and the whole history of where do these big Halo rings come from and all these kinds of stuff that is expanded upon in like 100 different novels. All that stuff that nerds like, but also in this like big budget M-rated, yeah, you shoot bad guy. I'm Captain Halo, kapow game. I had played like some multiplayer stuff of Halo before, but I've never played through any of the campaigns before until now. Played through 1, 2, 3, ODST, and Reach, and a little bit of Halo Wars, which is also interesting. The first game is essentially just kind of a Star Wars thing, which is fine by me. It starts off in the middle of the action, and you end up having to destroy this Halo ring, and that's about it. There's a zombie twist partway through, which I thought was cool because I didn't know that was in the game. That definitely helps shake up the gameplay as well, as they introduced this new enemy type that's like much scarier and like weirder. It also just feels like this big vast world that we don't really know too much about, which is what makes like the rest of the series cool, because they get the chance to flesh out everything. There's this one cool moment that really stuck out to me in the first game where they realized that they first realized what the Halo ring is, and Master Chief is like, oh, it's a weapon. Okay, how do we use it against the Reach? And I'm like, whoa, that was kind of dark. I didn't know you. I thought you were Captain Good Guy Halo Man. I didn't know you were like soldier, let's destroy the enemy at all cost kind of guy. And that kind of was the first moment that stuck out to me in the series. Is like, okay, there's a little more going on than just shooty shoot bad guy. The second game was really solid. They go into this whole backstory of this guy called the Arbiter, who's played by Keith David excellently. And basically his job was to stop the humans from destroying the Halo ring. His job was to stop you from doing what you did in the first game. And so he failed miserably. And so he has this like what he thinks is his hopefully redemption arc, as he tries to regain his like footing within the bad guy alien race. But as we go through his story and we play both what Master Chief is up to and this guy, the Arbiter, back and forth, we start to learn that like, oh, things obviously aren't as black and white as they were before. It's like this kind of cool war story from both sides. And then the third game, both of them team up, and it's like, okay, 1, we just see Master Chief's side, 2, we get a little bit of both, and then 3, they're working together to stop the ultimate bad guy. 3 is really cool because it's like big, and the first one on 360, so it's like bombastic. The first one would have like, oh, here's this really epic like action set piece where there's a tank and you drive it and fight guys. And then the third one is like 15 tanks and like 30 bad guy tanks, and you're all just like going nuts and fighting, and it's like it feels like a big war going on. It's great in scale. It's a cool epic finale to the series, and they like wrap up everything and like make peace with the bad guys and stuff, with like the main Keith David bad guys and stuff. It's cool. ODST was really interesting. I like that we got a little bit of a Firefly reunion with most of the characters. They also told the story out of order and allowed for a little more exploration during the levels and stuff like that. It was definitely a good idea to shake up the gameplay a lot. You also don't play as a Master Chief. You're just like Guy, so you get to see like sort of more what this universe is like for like day-to-day people, and not big boy superhero man. So it's kind of cool, and we see some of the events of the earlier games, but from a different perspective. Good idea to like flesh out the world a little bit. And then finally we played Reach, which is a prequel to the first game. And it's sort of like the Rogue One of the Halo series, although this came out way before Rogue One, where it ends like right before Halo 1 starts. It's cool too because they've kind of been building up the battle, like the fall of Reach, like the entire series. Um, we hear about it like right away in the at the start of the first game, and then like you hear about it a little bit, some pieces of it here and there. In ODST, they mention it a couple times, I think, and so then you get to like see all that play out, and it ends up being this like suicide mission with this like squad of Marines. What are they called? What is the Halo super soldier term? Is it just Marines? No, Marines are just like the normal guys. Spartans, that's it. I remembered it. And it's kind of cool. I wish some of the characters in that one were fleshed out a little bit more. There was like this one lady who had a robot arm, and I guess that was like her thing. And I didn't even realize she had a robot arm until like way later into the game. I'm like, oh, does she have a robot arm? That's cool. I didn't know that. It's a good time overall, and pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah, played a little bit of Halo Wars, which I think is great that it exists at all. Um, it's difficult to do RTSs at all on a console. They're kind of more of a PC kind of thing because you can like program shortcuts and things like that to make it easier to switch between multiple things happening. They do keep things fairly simple, and there is a lot of variety in the level in the main campaign levels. Like there's this one level where you're fighting this giant laser that like kind of sweeps back and forth between your guys, and you kind of have to like time it so that your guys don't get hit by the laser, and there's like certain barriers that are defending behind it. It's like a well made level, and a lot of RTSs like Warcraft and stuff usually don't get that creative with their level design, where they mostly just have like either you're defending this base for a certain amount of time as waves of guys come towards you, or you have a base and the enemies have a base and you have to attack them and eventually destroy their base. And those are kind of the main two kinds of levels you get in like a Warcraft. But yeah, the fact that they made like a real-time strategy game out of a first-person shooter series is kind of insane to me. It's like you take like the least nerdy genre of video game and combine it with like one of the more nerdy genres where you have to like keep track of resources and like different units and strategy and stuff like that, and spinning off of shooty shoot pow pow. I think that's awesome that they even attempted that in the series. Haven't played any of the like past Bungie games like 4 or 5 or any of that, because I've heard they're not very good. So I'm just not gonna bother. Also, you may have noticed if you haven't made it this long that this video is very long, and I'm gonna be splitting it into a couple different parts. So see you next week, hopefully. Kapow.